I'm a little bit confused as to the ERG published a paper a while back in 2015 called Change or Go. And in that, you proposed various methods or alternatives for leaving the EU, including being part of the EEA or having a Norway agreement. It seems that at the moment, all these are off the table. You will only be satisfied with some sort of no deal or WTO exit. What has changed?
Well, I didn't put my name to any document in favour of Norway or the EEA. My position has always been very clear that I think we should offer a comprehensive free trade agreement to our former EU partners. I think if that is the only option on the table apart from leaving without one, they would want to sit down and talk about it. And the great joy about that is that if they sit down and talk about it, we can leave on the 29th of March without imposing any new barriers or tariffs on our trade with each other under Article 24 of the GATT, which would give us up to 10 years then to agree all the details of a free trade agreement without imposing new barriers.
Sorry to interrupt you.
That's the obvious way forward.
Sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Redwood, because you yourself and several of your colleagues keep referring to this Article 24 of the GATT agreement, and it's comprehensively been proven to be inaccurate for what you mean it to be, which is this whole idea that we have 10 years to agree a deal. It is not that. The Article 24 is specifically designed for two countries that are in negotiations already, have already agreed the basic terms, and it allows them to trade on those terms until they dot the I's and cross the T's and sign it. And also, more importantly, more importantly, it needs both members to agree that. We can't just do it unilaterally.
No.
It would need the EU to do it with us. But we're nowhere near that stage, Mr. Redwood.
Well, I think we are, because we are in the happy position that we already have a tariff-free trading arrangement with the EU, and we would offer them the continuation of tariff-free trade. And various people have drafted a proper legal text based on EU-Canada and EU-Japan, which we know the EU is prepared to accept because they've offered it to those countries with a bit extra on offer if they wish. And as long as they would sit down and talk to us about it, we don't need to impose new barriers on the 30th of March, which would seem to be in both sides' interest. But I fully accept they would need to say yes.
But hi, this is Marcus speaking now. We should explain for listeners, Sir John Redwood's not in the studio. That's why I explained which one of us was speaking. It doesn't seem to me that what you're talking about is likely, that the European Union are likely to accept that. So going on to something else, I was on John Pienaar's show just recently with a deputy editor from The Telegraph who was saying, and she was a no-deal Brexiteer, she was saying we Brexiteers must get much, much better at explaining to people what will be better after we leave with no deal. And I said I couldn't agree more, and then asked her to come up with something, and she didn't have anything. So I'd be curious to know what do you think will be better, say, in the first 5 years, and then maybe going further beyond that? What will improve for people in Britain?
Well, how long have you got? I've just spoken for 45 minutes on that subject in my constituency in a public meeting. First
Are
thing
they
is
okay?
that we would start with a Brexit bonus budget in April. I think now the government has penciled that in if we do leave without signing the withdrawal agreement. And we've got around 12 billion net saving a year, which we could spend, or indeed we could say there must be around 39 billion available, which is the Treasury estimate of how much it would cost us in the first 2 or 3 years under the withdrawal agreement they're proposing. And I would propose a series of increases in public expenditure on services.
Sorry, forgive me interrupting. I am genuinely just trying to understand. So those bills, those financial bills, disappear. We don't have to pay those, exactly. So we still have that money. But that's not necessarily, I mean, you described it as a bonus. I mean, it's a bill that we wouldn't have to pay, but as I understand it,
money that the Treasury says they've got in order to send to rich countries in Europe, and I'm saying let's spend it on ourselves, because most people agree right, left and centre. It'd be nice to spend a bit more on our schools and our social care, for example. We found some money now for the health service. That would be great, and I think some tax cuts to give a boost to the economy. We're in a situation at the moment where the continental economies are slowing very badly. Italy in recession, Germany effectively in recession. Look, am I allowed to give you some good news, or are you just going to stop every piece of good news?
I'm trying to understand it.
So then we give a big boost to the economy. I've set out the economic forecasts. It gives you a 1% boost on GDP each year for the next 2 years. and that takes account of some loss of exports because people are so gloomy about our exports if we go over to WTO, and there would obviously be some tariffs imposed on our food exports, for example, by the European Union. But the great news is most of the things we export to the EU would be tariff-free under the EU schedule, so I don't think you should get too pessimistic about what the export prospects are.
You paint a picture that I don't have the base understanding that you have. I'm not working on this all of the time. You paint a picture that does actually make me feel somewhat optimistic.
Great.
But
we're allowed to be optimistic because our country has made a great decision to be more democratic, more free, and spend our own money on our own priorities.
No, hang on.
Then we would go on to sort out our fishing industry, which has been gravely
are not optimistic on those
we
terms.
We take back control of our fishing, and we catch more of the fish in our own boats. We build bigger
Mr. Redwood.
fish processing industries on shore because we land more of our own fish, and we get a better fishing industry.
Our own fish.
Do something similar for the farming industry.
Mr. Redwood, I have to interrupt you just for a second.
Why? Why am I never allowed to set out good news?
You just had an uninterrupted minute of telling us all your good news, but I'm afraid uninterrupted.
There's lots more.
Uninterrupted cannot go unchallenged. And some of the things that you say, you paint a very, very good picture. But for example, the money. Yes, but for example, but now comes the time of accountability. Now comes the time of scrutinizing some of your claims. And I'm afraid that is part of every interview. Some of the money that you say that we're not going to be sending and we're going to be saving, that money allows us to have frictionless trade. That money allows us to be part of agencies that make life easier for us, like the planes flying, the nuclear materials that we need in this country to be able to perform cancer screenings. All that stuff comes with that money. And I'm afraid your claim of saying, well, we don't spend that money, therefore we are richer for it, is somewhat simplistic, because what we give up from that, it's like saying, look, I have a shop and I pay 500 quid a month rent, and through that shop I make my living. Well, if I shut the shop down, yes, I do save £500 on rent every month, which means that I'm £500 richer, but I've also don't have an income. I don't have a job anymore. So it's really simplistic what you're saying, Mr. Redwood, and it has to go challenged.
Your analogy doesn't work, does it? Because it's not a shop.
But
we
Mr.
are
Redwood,
spending a very large sum of money each year to the EU. Some of it we get back in the form of spending in the UK that they determine rather than us. When we're free, we could choose to spend that money.
But we also benefit from frictionless trade, Mr. Redwood.
Am I allowed to answer your questions, or is this just a waste of time? You know, this is always the same.
Oh, stop frilling your petticoats about every time you're challenged on anything.
Shouting at us.
Go on.
For goodness sake.
Well, there is gross money and there is net money. And the gross money includes money sent back to the UK, where when we're free to choose our own priorities, we may spend it that way, we may spend it more efficiently and better. And then there's the net money, which is the money we never get back. That doesn't buy us access to trade. And we have already seen that the EU, of course, has a lot at risk here because they sell us a lot more than we sell them. And so there are already deals in place. It won't be an exit without any deals or agreements at all, to make sure that their planes can fly into London, and in return we get the rights to fly into Frankfurt and Paris. There are already deals to make sure the trucks can flow so that our trucks can drive on their roads and their trucks, rather more numerous, can drive on our roads. We've already seen that the port authorities of both Calais and Dover worked extremely hard because they wish to keep their business. We also know that Antwerp, Rotterdam, Ostend, Zeebrugge would love to take the business off Calais, so competition works and it will keep them honest. I do not see what these costly threats to trade are, nor is current trade with the EU frictionless, because of course it's a VAT border, a currency border, an excise border. Every time you buy or sell something in Europe, you have to fill in a shocking great long Intrastat declaration form.
But we know all the red tape is going to increase.
With any tariff you needed, it's a very similar kind of information. But I don't see what the problem is.
But Mr. Redwood, we know red tape, at least that we know for sure, is going to increase when we drop out of the EU. But look, we can fight.
You have a customs declaration, but you don't have an Intrastat declaration. Have you ever filled in an Intrastat declaration?
No, I have not.
That's easy or friction-free.
No, I have not. Mr. Redwood, we can argue the ins and outs of the referendum until the cows come home. I think I need to to move on to ask you about these three cabinet ministers.
So I'm not allowed to put out any of the other good news that would happen about changing the other policies.
Here's the problem. I'm very, very happy with you putting out as much good news as you want. But the problem is that every time I try and interrupt you to actually correct some of the stuff that you're telling us, you get very irate. So I suggest we sort of move on to something that is current, because we can argue about the EU referendum, but I think it's fair to say that you and I are not going to agree.
Well, I'm not arguing about a referendum. I'm arguing about what we do
about
next
the benefits.
to maximise the prosperity and freedoms of the British people. And 17.4 million people were very sensible people who fully understood what they were voting
No,
for.
they didn't. That is absolutely demonstrably not the case. Of course it's not the case.
So you're going to insult the 17.4 million?
No, Mr. Redwood, quite clearly I'm not going to insult the 17.4 million. Stop fetishising them. Right? It's such a ludicrous thing to say. Lots and lots of people voted, and every single one of us went into the polling booth with a view about the most complicated question we had been asked in the 45 years I've been alive, and a binary question was put to us, which was moronic and dangerous. No, people did not know what they were going to get. And every time you people start representing this falsehood that 17.4 million went in with a full understanding of trade deals and what the future would look like, you tell a massive lie. So stop it.
That we're losing a lot of money under this deal, that we haven't done terribly well out of the single market and customs union.
How can you say that, Mr. Redwood?
Remain told them we would be leaving the single market and customs union, and they voted to get their country back and to appoint people to Parliament who can make the decisions for them. And the advantage they have with that is if we make a mess, they can throw us out and choose a better lot, and that is a democratic process.
They could do the same with MEPs.
But they don't control
Which
the
you
whole
know.
show. Everybody is in control, and nobody is in control of the EU. When you look at the Commission, the Council of Ministers, the European Court...
Much the same as the civil service that we have here.
There are so many institutions, many of them not directly accountable to the British electors.
A bit like the House of Lords and the Civil Service. But, Mr. Redwood, you just said that we never benefited from the single market. Since 1973, our GDP per capita has risen faster than any G7 country apart from Japan. How can you say that we haven't benefited?
Than before we were in the EEC/EU, and there's been an EU study of this which shows the UK got least advantage out of the single market at all. They think that we got a 1% GDP gain over all the years we were in it, so a fractional small percentage each year. I think it was probably fractionally negative, because we had a very damaged fishing industry, a very damaged farming industry. We lost out
all damaged by Europe.
Competition in areas where they took all the tariffs off, but they did not lower the barriers in business services and financial services and so forth for many years, which is where we had a competitive advantage. So the thing was always asymmetric against us.
Mr. Redwood, I'm running out of time, and I do appreciate you giving us your time. But
I'd like to tell your listeners more about what's really going on, instead of having to listen to all these absurd sound bites that we've heard for 3 years.
No, well, I
persuade people in the referendum.
Okay, well, you can maybe do some of that on someone else's watch, but I need to ask you a question that I would like to ask you and for you to answer. One of the problems that we have is accountability and responsibility. So you've got all the sunny uplands that you're telling us about, and who knows, maybe they will come true. What will happen if they don't? Are you prepared to take responsibility? So, for example, we've had Dr. Liam Fox said all these trade deals will be rolled over. I think 4 of them have been rolled over. The rest of them, there were 40. I think we've got 4. A lot of promises have not been kept. I don't want to go into the details, but what I'd like to know is who is going to carry the can if, and I stress if, this does not work out like you are promising to my listeners and you've promised to the people of this country. Who is going to be held responsible?
Well, I haven't made a promise to the people of this country because I'm not in the government, and the British people as a whole take responsibility for the decision to leave. Their government, at the time being, has to take responsibility for how it's handled, and they may handle it well, they may handle it badly. If the government handles it badly, they will undoubtedly be thrown out, and they'll choose a government that can then improve it and change it, which is how our system works. But it will be the government that is accountable as we go forward.
So it's going to be Theresa May and her cabinet that you think is going to be responsible by how things will pan out.
Well, of course.
what I'm trying to get to is that you seem to have quite a lot of influence on what the Cabinet can and cannot do. The ERG have demanded the backstop be taken out of the withdrawal agreement. We all know that's not going to happen. So when it doesn't happen, who are you going to blame?
Well, the ERG group of MPs do think that the current withdrawal agreement is unacceptable, and we were amongst those who voted against it. But remember that the withdrawal agreement went down by a majority of 230 against, and that's rather more than there are ERG members, and it included all of the opposition parties. So it wasn't just us that was against it, and more importantly, it included the DUP, on whose support, of course, the current coalition government entirely rests. So it is good advice from the ERG, from the DUP, and from all the opposition parties that this withdrawal agreement needs substantial amendment. And if it is not amended, then I fear that the government putting it again will get a similar result, that they will continue to lose the withdrawal agreement unless and until it is amended in a way that people think it needs to be.